Hello and welcome to Down and Dirty with Darci. I'm your host, Darci Smith, also known as Career Coach Darci. We are here to get down and dirty about careers, uncovering salaries, wild stories, backgrounds, and more from guests with some of the most eccentric professions each week. This podcast is presented by Onomy. Welcome back to Down and Dirty with Darci. It's Career Coach Darci here, and I have a fun little surprise today. The interview, the guest, she is one of my absolute best friends in the entire world. And the cool part is that we met through Cintas, which was my first job out of college. So I met her, I think it was day one when I walked in the door and we kind of like made eye contact and we're like, we're going to be friends. This is going to work. And yeah, we've stayed friends ever since. She's originally from Jersey area. And so it's cool to, now that she's been in LA forever and she loves it, I think I've convinced her. But yeah, I go visit her every time I podcast in LA. So it was great to have her in the studio. And it's different because she has more of a corporate focused career. So she's in project management, and I get a ton of people always asking me, what is project management? How do I get into it? I feel like it's this buzzword and I don't really know what I need to do to prove that I can also be a project manager. So I think it's really cool. And I definitely want to jump into that interview. If you're hearing my voice right now that it doesn't sound the best, it's because I just got back from Boston. I apparently gave myself a crazy travel schedule this June. But my boyfriend and I are so obsessed with The Cure, which is an 80s band. And they were playing in San Francisco, which is where I live, when we were in Scotland. So we immediately were like, we have to find them wherever they are next. We're going to go. And they were in Boston. So we booked a flight out for the weekend to go see them in Boston. And honestly, I had the best time. We ended up, this is so ridiculous. The concert was 45 minutes outside of the city. So getting an Uber out there was already tough enough. Like we had 6 of them cancel on us. And then at the concert, we were like, how are we ever going to get home? There was no public transportation or anything. So I'm trying to order an Uber, couldn't get home. So I started walking through the parking lot and just asking random people if I could pay them to drop us off in Boston. And so I literally walked up. There was this lady and she had a daughter that was 16 and they were leaving. And I leaned in and I go, excuse me, any chance you guys are heading back to Boston? And she goes, yeah, jump in. I didn't even ask her if I could get in the car yet. She automatically was like, yeah, guys, get in. Where are you going? She was totally just so down to drive us. So we just had her drive us there and just gave her $100. But the best time, we had the roof down and we were just blasting The Cure the whole way home, talking, and we ended up exchanging numbers. They were just the cutest family. And I hope they're listening to this because they made my entire Boston trip the best. So thank you guys for giving us a ride home. Really appreciate it. But yeah, I just, anyways, wanted to jump into the interview. So let's go ahead and do that. This is Laura. And yeah, I hope you like it. Welcome back to Down and Dirty with Darci. I have Laura here with me today, and I'm going to let her take over, but I'm really excited because she's a project manager. I just have to say that. And I get so many people asking me how to get into project management. So this is a really important one and near and dear to my heart because she's my best friend. So, so welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Laura.
So I'm originally from New Jersey. Been in LA for about 8 years, I think, at this point. Didn't start in project management. Honestly, didn't know much about it other than my mom's in it. Didn't really know what that entailed. So started my career, at least, management trainee. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do out of school. Fell into an SAP project. So the company that I was with was changing kind of, if you're not familiar with SAP, it's just an operating system. So that project lasted 4 years. I was not a project manager on that project, though. I more did training, so sort of not quite technical training. More I sat side by side with people and was like, this is how you used to do your job. This is how you do it now in the new system. And then from there, the project kind of wrapped up. It went 4 years. I originally thought it was going to go 2.
And you were traveling that whole time, right?
Yeah. So I traveled 80% of the time.
80%.
It was a lot.
Oh my gosh. But you loved it.
Loved it. Yeah. Loved every second of it. Yeah. We didn't travel to the most exciting places, but I traveled with in the beginning of the project when we were piloting it, I traveled with probably 60 people all around my age. We were in Kentucky, which honestly, Kentucky was a lot of fun.
Kentucky slaps.
Yeah, it was a good time.
That's amazing.
But loved the project. And then once we were pretty much live with the company, so we did it in rollout. So we did about, I think it was maybe 15 locations a month. Once it was kind of trailing off, I moved into a different role where we were getting ready for the phase 2. So how can we improve what we did? And that's more where it wasn't quite a project manager role, but I was managing smaller projects. Mm-hmm. And then from there is where I kind of got into a more traditional project management role.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's
okay.
Kinda...
I have so many questions. So the reason that I really wanted to have you on is because there's a lot of people that come to me and say, I work on projects all the time and I manage them. Like I see it go from A to Z, but I don't have a title of a project manager. So how do I get into project management? Like, what are some things that I can leverage, whether they be soft skills or whatever it is? How do you talk the talk of a project manager? So kind of take it back to before you really got into it and maybe give some advice on, like, let's say they did get an interview or even are able to get to that point. How can they talk the talk of a project management from a standpoint of maybe they're in like an operations role or something?
Okay.
Right?
So I like to think of project management as a skill set, not a title, because I didn't have the title when I felt like I was managing projects. So if you're in a similar situation, I would say start making a portfolio of projects you're managing at work, even if it's, I don't know, our overhead's too high, you need to bring this down. What did you put into place? And then kind of put numbers to it. That's how you can interview for the job. You don't need the title of project management as long as you can show that you've managed some sort of project and you got results. And even if you didn't
make it up, not make it up, but make up a project that wasn't labeled a project at your company.
Correct.
Yeah? Okay.
So I think everyone to some degree in their job manages projects. If you think, I've been thinking about what I would say to someone. And if you were the person in your friends group that is planning all your trips, that's a soft skill. Like that was the first time I was like, oh, I can do this. Mm-hmm. If you are a great communicator, you can be a project manager. If you're great at leading without authority, you can be a project manager. I think it is a job that anyone can learn. Not everyone can do greatly, but I think everyone already has the skills. They just don't realize it, whether they have the title or not.
Okay. Now I want to flip the script and take it from a sense of, as a project manager, what does it really mean? Like if someone's listening to this and is like, okay, I kind of like organization. I like managing projects. I love planning my girls' trips, like all those things. That makes sense for me. So then how do you put it into, this is a corporate project management title or whatever it is? Like, what does that mean? Like, what are you doing?
So it depends on the company that you're at. And so currently in my role, I am part of what is called a PMO. It is the project management department. Okay. I am on a team of a lot of project managers, but I do not work with them. I have my own projects.
And sorry, I just need to cut you off. Do you manage people?
No.
Okay.
That's the tough part. That's one of the toughest parts is you're responsible for the project. So this was... And kind of back to your question, it depends on what company you're with. The reason I say that is my first true project management role, I felt like I worked for the people on the project, but not the project itself. And what I mean by that is, as a true project manager and kind of how the role is intended, is you were trying to push the results. You were trying to push the project forward. Mm-hmm. If you're at a company that doesn't have a structured project management role, or they've never had one before, a lot of times they may just throw projects at you that aren't necessarily fully vetted. They may change their minds a lot. So that's something you just kind of have to work around. It's a great learning opportunity though, because the world's your oyster. You can manage that project however you want. Mm-hmm. As opposed to the role I'm in now, which is a more standard project management role where there's kind of a way to do things. Okay. But I work for the project. I am trying to push the project forward. And if someone in an executive role is trying to push us on a timeline that doesn't make sense, it's up to me to be like, this doesn't make sense. This is why.
I like that.
So it's a little bit
different. You have authority. Yeah. You just don't manage people. Correct. But you can say, I can see it from my view, which is this is not going to get done in this timeline. And here's why. Here's what we should do.
Correct. And I mean, they don't always, you don't have that much power.
Like that. Yeah.
But that's kind of where you have the conversation of, okay, if this is the deadline, then we need to figure out what is priority and where we can cut like some tasks out that are just not going to get done on this timeline that we're on.
Okay. And then one of the biggest questions I get asked too is, I don't know how to make sure that I'm putting my best foot forward as a project manager. I manage a lot of projects, but I don't use things like these buzzwords like Waterfall, Agile, Scrum, Gantt charts. Like I could rattle off a bunch, and I've never worked in them. I just know them from being in my industry, but I wouldn't know how to talk about that. But I feel like you've explained this to me before, and I was like, oh, that's all Waterfall is? Like that's just doing a project that way.
Yep.
So how would you recommend someone describe themselves as a project manager that doesn't necessarily use these quote unquote methodologies? Is there a way?
So I would say learn the buzzwords would be my advice.
Okay.
The way you can do that, though, is there's an organization called PMI, Project Management Institute. I think it stands for, maybe. Might need to look that up. But that's who administers the PMP, so Project Management Professional, which is a certification that a lot of project managers have. There is also a book that they have. It's dry. It's not the greatest read, but there's a glossary at the end. Honestly, there are and kind of like you said, it's buzzwords. There's probably other plain English words we use for the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That you can just start putting into your vocabulary that you might be helpful and might help you kind of land that true project manager position.
That's helpful. Just so people know, like, what is Waterfall? Like, for example.
Perfect. So you'll hear Waterfall, and usually it's compared to something called Agile. So I'll kind of explain both. Waterfall is step 1, step 2, step 3, and you're doing your project in that way. It is the more traditional project management route. That is most non-technical projects will probably use Waterfall.
Okay.
And project managers usually use Waterfall. There is something else now that people hear a lot called Agile. And that is something that you do in iterations. And the reason behind this methodology is quite literally to be more agile on your project. When you determine how you determine which one you use is if you are working on a project where you know you're not exactly sure of the requirements sometimes, you know that things may not go as planned. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of question marks. And you want to be able to pivot quickly. You want to do Agile. The difference in practice is Agile is done what's called in sprints. So think of it like building a house. You're going to choose what parts of that house you build first, and you'll log all the tasks on what's called a backlog. It's essentially just a list. These are all the tasks we have to do. Mm-hmm. And then you break those out into digestible pieces, and that's your scope of work for that sprint, which has a finite amount of time. So a lot of companies do 2-week sprints. We're going to do task A, B, C in these 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, we're going to talk about it, see what worked, see what didn't, see how we can pivot for the next sprint.
I am geeking so hard. This is so fun. I hope people listening love this as much as I do, and they're not like, what is going on? I'm turning this off. Because I love it. And it makes so much sense in like layman's terms. Like I would have no idea what it just sounds fancy. Waterfall, like what does that mean? What kind of method is that? It's literally just going from A to Z. It's like basically, step 1, step 2, step 3. And then if you take the Agile, it's sprints. Okay, now we're just taking it in these chunks, basically.
More digestible. And then each one, and these are where all the buzzwords come in. There's something called like a retrospective where you literally sit with your team, see what worked, but that just allows you to get better every sprint, where Waterfall's just... What happens sometimes and why they don't use it for technical resources, if you try to build a website in a waterfall way, you can get to the end and you hand your client the deliverable and they're like, there was no time for feedback. We didn't give you feedback throughout this project, which Agile allows you to do.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Got it. And I'm so curious about what is the typical pay for a project manager? Do you know from technical side, from normal side? You know, obviously you know what you make, but it's like, what is project management? How high can you get? Like, why do people want this job so much? I feel like everyone wants to get into project management.
So I'm in the low 100s. I don't know what a technical project, so I'm not a technical, I'm considered a business project manager. Okay. Mm-hmm. But the reason I think it's a great career and why I think a lot of people want to do it is every industry has project management. So if you're in a project management role, and I mean, I kind of did something similar. My first role was in wealth management, and it just wasn't something I really understood. And now I'm in more education. Mm-hmm. And like I said, every industry has it. I'm not going to say it's fully recession proof, but there are always projects.
That's true.
Always something to do.
You can literally work across every industry
Yep.
because there's going to be a project or a program to run or something somewhere. And I think, that makes the most sense. Yeah.
And the other thing is, it doesn't have to be a corporate job. There's construction project managers. That's huge. Interior design. Like, even if you're doing something outside of the corporate world, you should definitely see if your company has project managers. I'm specifically a cross-functional one, so I work on projects that have multiple departments, but at my company, each department has their own project manager also. So there's so many opportunities out there. They call them different things sometimes. There's program managers, portfolio managers, and sometimes they mean something slightly different, but it's really kind of what we said. It's all project management.
Yeah, it's all running something that's not people. It's like the project or a program or something. So you mentioned PMP, and I've talked to my clients about this. Obviously, you're the expert, so I'm going to let you speak to it. But people ask me all the time, what certifications should I get or what courses should I take in my specific industry? And one of the things I always tell them is I can tell you for a fact that in the industry of being a project manager, or if you want to get into that, PMPs are looked at very highly. So I want to know two things. One, what was your experience like getting the PMP, and do you think it really did help you? And then two, how would you recommend someone go about it that has, like, should they just do it to help them get a job? Is that a good idea?
So the PMP and kind of the experience around it. I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I got a stipend for continuing education. So my job did pay for it. That being said, the exam itself is only about $500. I strongly recommend it for anyone that is trying to get into any kind. Honestly, even if it's not project management,
it just looks good.
These are extremely transferable skills.
Yeah. So anyone, just so we reiterate, anyone can go get this.
Yes.
You don't have to have a company sponsor you.
You don't have to have a company sponsor you. However, there is an application process, and I think you have to have, it's like 35 months of project management, but there's a part where you can explain that. Like, I put the SAP experience that I had, and
like operational things.
Yep.
It doesn't have to necessarily be project management.
They're not going to ask, well, did you have the title?
Yeah, okay.
You just have to explain the projects you were on.
You're paying them money, so I'm sure they're going to accept people.
Yep. I've only heard of like one person get denied, I think. So,
yeah.
And even so, like, you can always, you don't have to pay before you do the application. Go do the application, see what they're asking you.
Okay.
And then see maybe at your job, if you're not in a project management role, okay, is there something I can take on so I can hit that 35, I think it's 35 months, which is an odd number.
Yeah.
But the exam itself, I think, was about $500. The coursework is kind of expensive, so that was probably closer to like $1,000.
Okay.
But you don't need the coursework. There's a book, I think it was literally just called PMI, which is also the organization. Super confusing.
Yeah.
But there's a book, the one that I said, where you can get all the buzzwords. Everything's in there.
So if you're a good studier, you can do that instead of the coursework.
Yep.
And then, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of free resources out there. You definitely don't. The only reason I did the coursework was because it was paid for.
Right.
Do I think I could have done it without it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend it to
Yeah.
everyone. Something else that's definitely worth looking into. I also did Scrum Master. So that's the Agile side.
Okay.
Where I felt.
And sorry, Scrum Master is a certification.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's CSM, Certified Scrum Master.
Okay.
That's the first one you get. And then there's a lot of other ones that you can get after, which are more industry specific.
Got it.
So Agile, like I said before, a lot of technical project managers use that methodology. That one is just 2 days over the weekend, and then you take an exam at the end. It was the easiest thing. I think the exam was 45 minutes. I don't remember how much that one cost. Probably a couple $100.
Oh my gosh.
Looks great on your resume.
Yeah.
And it helped a lot. So the reason I did both is, and I know this was kind of part of your question, like, how do you get started on a PMP? I would recommend, doing your research, because I definitely bit off more than I could chew. I kind of cold turkey just started diving into PMP. I'm a great studier usually, and I was like, I can totally learn this. It was a lot harder than I thought. It was it was more learning how they wanted me to answer the questions. Sometimes I didn't necessarily agree with the answers because it's very subjective.
I see. It's like method to the madness type thing versus like a black and white answer.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, okay, person A and B on your project are having an issue. Do you talk to them together or separate? And there's a right answer. That was like the difficult part.
You're like, I think it depends on the management style, dude. Or lady, whoever wrote this question.
So that was like really hard. So in the middle of studying for my PMP, I did Scrum Master just to get a quick win. But it turns out that Agile, like all that I learned on the Scrum Master helped me so much for my PMP. I didn't realize Agile's fairly new compared to Waterfall. And in the book and the coursework, there just I didn't find enough content on Agile.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of questions on it though. So that Scrum Master helped me get that background.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. People that are listening are like, okay, maybe I want to become a project manager. This sounds great. Pros and cons. Give me like a pro and a con.
Okay. Pro, steady work. You don't own the project work. So I can, other than like logging tasks, I sign off at 5 p.m.
Nice.
I don't have to continue working on anything. Cons, leading without authority. It is tough. Escalating things because you're not their boss. That's tough. It takes a lot of balance, because you need to keep that good working relationship. You want them to do what you're asking them to do.
This is like the interview question that I love to ask of like, how do you keep people on task, or what do you do, or what's your style to do that? It doesn't mean leadership style. It means like literally if you need something from someone, how do you get it from them? And I have a lot of hiring managers that ask that because they really want to say like, what do you do when they're not doing what they're supposed to, right? And you're not their manager, so they're like, I don't care.
And that's it's really interesting now that I'm on a full project management team to see different styles though. So I've had the opportunity to sit in on other people's project meetings, and a lot of different styles. For me, what's worked in those situations is kind of just emotional intelligence, tailoring your communication style, and buy-in. It's almost like networking.
Right. So if you like obviously were to progress and things like that, what does it look like? Where can you go? Like, I guess my question is, when you move up, are you moving up? Do you then have to manage other project managers to move up, or can you just take on way bigger like enterprise projects that would allow you to make more money? Like, how do people move up in project management?
Both of the things you just said. So there are, so we have program managers and portfolio managers, which are essentially just larger projects, much larger projects though.
I see. Okay.
And then if you want to manage people, there is like at my company, a director of the PMO.
Got it.
And they lead the people under them. So you can really go either way.
Do you know anyone's salaries that are like, I'm just curious, do you know like a PMO director? What is that? I mean, I've worked with some that are in like the 300s, but I've also worked with some in like the hundreds. I think it depends on the size of the company.
I would say definitely the industry.
But you can definitely make good money moving up in this world.
Absolutely. And then it also depends probably on the budget of those projects, because I know one of our managers is working on like opening a full distribution center, including like finding where we're going to put that. That's a very large, like it's a huge budget for the project. So just depends how large of a project you want to manage.
Yeah. Sweet. I feel like we probably overloaded people with information, but I'm obsessed with this, and I just like, thank you so much for like diving into it and everything. Because like I said, I want to say it's probably about 70% of the people that I work with, because they've moved up from like some sort of administrative role to operations role to then taking on all these different things. And they're like, wait, I'm literally managing projects. I could be working from like a capacity where I am a full-on project manager. The only other thing I just want to ask you is the difference between technical and regular project management. And is there one way you should go or not go?
So if you feel you are technically inclined, I would say go the technical route. I don't know this for sure. It feels that there's probably maybe more money there. However, I've been on technical projects and I don't consider myself technically inclined, and it is difficult to understand the project work sometimes if it's a little bit over your head. So if you are more maybe on the creative side, I would say go the business route, or even if you're not a technical person, I would say go the business route.
Yeah. I've met a lot of people that were like software engineers and then moved into technical project management. So they're very engrossed in that world and they know to speak to other engineers, which is a huge skill set because it's a different type of personality. So that's another thing too, is you have to realize the type of people you're going to be working with, I would assume. But yeah, no, this has been super insightful. So thank you. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to leave us with, but I feel like we really touched on. I know you were preparing because you're like
I was so nervous. Honestly, I do have like not really closing words, but
yes.
If you're currently in your job and you feel, because I know you've said you have people who are working on these projects, honestly, it can't hurt to ask, even if your company doesn't have a project manager role, like, is there a way to create that role for me?
Yeah.
Just honestly, from that title, if you're trying to move up, obviously it does look better. You don't need it. You can separate yourself with like a PMP or different other ways, but it doesn't hurt to ask the question, because I've seen companies just decide maybe we do want a project manager, and it's possible. It's worth asking.
That's so good. And I want to piggyback just one other thing is I also think that if you told them from a standpoint of, I want to make this company better and I want to do these things that I'm already doing, which is managing these projects from like a really professional and educational way, is there any way that we can or you can ask for a stipend to get the PMP? I feel like that could really help you too. And obviously you don't tell them that the whole reason is so you can go somewhere else, but they might tell you like, yes, we will pay for that, but you have to stay 6 months or a year, or you have to pay it back, which if it's not even that expensive, no big deal. But I think that'd be great to get help. Like some companies will even let you take like a hour or so off to study, things like that. So I think that's a really great tip to just ask and like ask for the job or ask for the stipend. So yeah, let's close with that. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And let's go eat some sushi.
Can't wait.
Yeah. All right. Love you. Bye. Talking to Laura was so much fun. I always love talking to Laura because obviously she's my best friend, but it was cool to get a different side to her, really jumping into that project management stuff. I felt like we really got into the weeds. And so it was pretty awesome to get a better understanding of what that looks like from her perspective. If you guys have questions or more, want to know more information about any questions you had about the actual interview, you're welcome to DM me at Down and Dirty with Darci on Instagram. That way we'll make sure to see it because we have Onami running that page. So we'll make sure to see your DMs because sometimes, I'm not going to lie, mine get a little bit crazy on the Career Coach Darci page. So shoot us a DM over there. Let us know what questions you have about it. And we're happy to answer them in a career column, or I can answer them on the Instagram page. So hope you guys liked that interview. And now we're going to jump into the career column. I wear many hats for my company, and I've been here for almost 10 years. I'm having trouble finding out how much I'm worth since not too many people do the same thing as me. Glassdoor is not helping me, and I need to know. What do I do? Okay, here's the first thing that I'm going to say is I would ask your boss or manager or whoever you need to talk to, maybe it's the owner in this situation, I would ask them, if I were to leave, how would you replace me? Like, what job would you replace me with? Get to know exactly what your title is or what your value is. If that doesn't feel comfortable, the other thing that you can do is ask for a one-on-one and sit down and say, I'm really interested in adding more value to the team and going through my responsibilities and making sure that I'm hitting my metrics. And use that as a way to get them to sit down and write out with you exactly what your responsibilities are, what you're doing, so you can kind of get a better grasp of what that looks like. Once you have those, then I would start plugging those into Google and things like that as a job description and start seeing like what title comes up. So that would be my best advice on trying to figure out where you land in terms of what your title might be for your next job that you want to look at. What's the biggest thing you've seen people do as to why they aren't getting responses on their applications? Is there anything that's an easy fix? Oh man, this is a loaded question, but an easy fix would be not to have too long of a resume. Lately, I've been seeing resumes that when I open it up, it's overwhelming. There's so much information and you're probably a really good fit, but honestly, no one wants to read through all of that. So what happens is you just get pushed to the side. So even though you're thinking, this is great for me, I'm a good fit, I have all the information, I'm hitting all of those keywords, there's still too much going on in the resume and we're not able to see it. It's kind of like if something's being watered down so much by so much other fluff and information, you're not getting to the good stuff. It's hindering you to have a too long of a resume. So my first tip is going to be definitely shorten the resume as much as you can. The thing that's most important is what you're currently doing. So what's recent and relevant. So really focus on that. And the things that are older, so 10 years down the road, just put the success part of it. You don't have to put all the little details about what you're working on, what you are doing. Really focus on that in your most recent and relevant information. Is there anything interesting you have seen lately that has helped your clients get jobs? I love this question because I have the perfect answer. And you might think this is a little bit weird, but it made a huge difference this was actually a candidate of mine. I own a recruiting company. So this was a candidate of mine that I was helping get a job with a client that I was recruiting for. And I didn't even tell him to do this. He just did it on his own. He wrote thank you notes, like literally with his hand, wrote thank you notes and mailed them to the office to every single person he met when he had went to an interview. I think he had met 5 people and he individually labeled them, what they talked about, made them super personalized. The owner of the company called me and was like, did you coach the person to do this? And I was like, no, it was completely him. He wanted to do it and it made such a huge difference. So that's something interesting that I would recommend. I know it's a little bit old school, but it's pretty nice. I mean, I like getting mail, so maybe it's a good idea. I am starting from scratch. How do I write my resume? Is there a template that works best, and where should I go for that? Starting from scratch is difficult with a resume, and there definitely are templates out there. I don't particularly love using a template, and the only reason is because when you want to change the formatting, there's tables and there's things that make it really complicated and hard. So I actually prefer to just use either a Google Doc, because that's never going to go away, or if you have Word on your computer, Pages, whatever editing tools, but just keep it very simple. So that way you're not adjusting tables and things. So there's these certain websites you can go to that would create it for you with tables. I don't personally like them. Shameless plug, I do have a resume course, but it's not about that. I do have a template that has no tables. So what I would recommend is just making it super simple. So you want to have your name at the top, your contact information, key highlights about what you've done. And if you don't have any of those, maybe projects or things you worked on in school that are relevant, then your experience, and then skills. And then if volunteer work is important, education. And that's about it. It's very simple. It doesn't have to be anything magical unless you are in graphic design or something, then maybe you would add a little bit more. But again, you would just link to your portfolio. So I think resumes should always stay very simple, making sure people can read them and get the information that they need to get out of it. All right, guys, I will see you hear you. You'll hear me next week. Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening to That Onomy podcast. Onomy is a creator-led educational platform that teaches you the things you wished you learned in school so you can thrive in adulthood. Onomy lessons are completely free and they're taught by some of your favorite creators from around the internet. Head to onomy.co to start learning about things like budgeting, investing, taxes, how to thrive in your relationships, how to find your dream job, and so much more. That's onomy.co, onomy.co. See you there.